I mean, Eleanor Roosevelt just walked into my life, and she turned it around. Dr. King called me on the phone one day. Malcolm X knocked at the door one day. Nelson Mandela, he and I had an exchange of letters while he was in prison. And just these things kept emerging, and each time I saw opportunity to become involved in what their struggle and our struggle was about, and felt I'd make as big a difference as I could.
Stand up.
From a defabricated solar-powered garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA, this is Stand Up with Pete Dominick. On today's episode, a look back at a simpler time in America when we all just used DDT. And now, the podcast host who has no need for such things because he banishes pests by sheer force of personality, Pete Dominick.
He is never wrong. Thank you very much, Pete Co., and very happy that you are here with me today because I have what I think is a really good and very special conversation with comedian and podcast host and personality Adam Sank. Adam has never been on the show before, but I follow him on social media, and I thought we might have a really good conversation. And I thought right. This is a good one, folks. I'm sure you're going to like it and learn a lot from my conversation with Adam Sank on today's program. Thank you to everybody who reached out about the special extravaganza bonanza that I did about the Tucker Carlson firing yesterday. Smart cousin Darcy said, yesterday I just ignored all the coverage around Tucker Carlson's firing. I found myself only wanting to hear from your experts. But given that you're a one-person team, I thought I'd hear some clips at the top and then some interviews with folks you talked with before the news broke, and then much more expanded coverage the next day, which I was fine with. But wow, you outdid any expectations I had. I really appreciate the work you put into making that happen. Thank you very much. Darcy, thank you. You are the best cousin and friend a guy could ask for. And I got quite a few other sentiments like that as well, but I don't want to stroke my ego for too much longer. I generally read those things, so you know you're not alone in appreciating the show and the work that I'm doing, and hopefully understand the value of it all. So thank you, and sign up now if you haven't already for a paid subscription at patreon.com/Pete Dominick. I do have a news segment today, even though my conversation with Adam, I think, is over an hour. It feels arrogant to take up that much of your time, but hey, I do what I do, and if you want to listen to it all, then great. If you don't, you can always skip ahead. You can stop, come back. That's what's great about podcasts. And that being said, my conversation with Adam starts at 20 minutes in, but you are not going to want to miss this first 20 minutes because it's packed with good stuff. And by the way, I didn't mention that Adam is gay, and normally I wouldn't say that, but basically our conversation is all about that, which is what I wanted it to be. I wanted to talk to a gay guy around my age, the kind of gay guys I grew up with and around in New York City in my 20s and 30s. And it's exactly what we did. So again, I really am very happy with this one, and I think you're going to like it a lot. But first, some news. Because this is a daily show, and I don't do the news every day, and I don't have to cover it all the time, and I encourage you to get away from it whenever you want and can. But man, yesterday was a big one. A few things I just want to mention and play for you. It was day 826 of the Biden administration, and President Biden formally announced his 2024 re-election campaign. Did you see the video? He put out a whole video, and it's really good. I think it's pretty well done. Painstaking research that went into what they should put in that 3-minute video, and then later on he gave a speech. But yeah, he is running. 70% of Americans believe Biden should not run for re-election. 54% of Americans, quote, accept that Biden is running for re-election. 63% of Republicans want Trump to be president again, even if he's found guilty of a crime. But 40% of Republicans, of course, don't want him to be president again. I actually joined my good friend and basically life partner, David Campbell, who's the host of Today Extra on Australian National Network Television Channel 9, to talk a little bit about this. I thought this would be fun and give you my insights first.
All right, let's bring in political commentator in America now, Peter Dominic from New York. Pete, good morning to you. Good evening to you. Today marks 4 years since his 2020 campaign launch. What's been the reaction to the re-election bid over there?
Oh, you guys, great to be back with you. And it's electric. Everybody here is going nuts. We're really excited and filling up stadiums and arenas to hear President Joe Biden speak. Now, I'm kidding. It's, I mean, we've been watching this guy for like 30 years and he's running for re-election. No surprise there, but it's, there's not a lot of energy and enthusiasm right now behind either of these candidates or any candidates, really.
Let's get on to who might be going against him in a second. But is there anyone else in the Democrats that's going to be going up here and trying to get this Democratic nomination? Is there literally no one else?
That's right. I mean, it's a good question. And there are other people that are running for the nomination, but nobody that is being seriously considered. The truth is, Campbell, if somebody thought that they could beat Joe Biden, they would be running. But nobody can beat Joe Biden. Nobody wants to try to beat Joe Biden. And his likely challenger is going to be, again, Donald Trump. A friend of mine said it's the Thrilla and Vanilla because these two guys are known quantities.
Yeah, well, they are. According to Trump, he's Sleepy Joe. He's 80 years old now. Yeah. So if he wins re-election and is president for another term, he'd be wrapping up at the age of, 85-ish? Is that right? Does he have the stamina for it, do you think?
He seems to, as of today. But I mean, guys, we're not supposed to talk about age, apparently, even in America. But he's 82. He's very old. My dad is 79. I asked him if he could be presidenting, and he said, and he's in great shape. He's like, I am so happy when I'm able to get up in the morning and play, cards with your mother. For goodness sake, no. I mean, but so is his challenger. I mean, yes, he's running against a guy who today, guys, the jury was selected for rape allegations against his challenger, Donald Trump, who's been accused of sexual assault by over 20 women. So that's what we're talking about here.
Do you think so? Is this it now? Are we going back, like you said? It's the Thriller and Vanilla. It's Nearly Dead versus Old Red. Is that what we're talking about here? It's going to be Trump Biden again. It's like this is like Fraser Ali, but like slower.
Yeah.
and way whiter also than that.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, that's a bad comparison, Campbell, because that was exciting. No, this is not. Yeah, this is most likely what's going to be. But of course, what matters is that Donald Trump is being indicted. He's been indicted once, and he's being looked at least 3 to 4 other cases. That could be a huge game changer. There's really not a lot of enthusiasm behind Donald Trump that's for sure. Joe Biden still has the better rating than Ronald Reagan did at this point in his presidency. So it's not like he's not popular in America.
Okay, I want to ask you, Pete, about Tucker Carlson, the ultra-conservative Fox host who's been fired. I know you're a big fan.
Oh, yeah.
Is this a new era for Fox? And if so, how could that, play a hand in the upcoming election?
It's a great question. I think that this is a huge, very consequential move by Fox News to fire Tucker Carlson, their breadwinner, their biggest moneymaker. You know who they fired before him? Their last biggest moneymaker in that time slot, Bill O'Reilly. You know who they fired before him? The former president of Fox News, Roger Ailes. All three of these guys were fired for similar things, for being total creeps around women. And that's, I think, the most important part about this is how endemic sexism and misogyny is at Fox News. But it's also important that Fox News may not be wanting to play with people who are going to lie about things like the election anymore. We'll see what happens. I don't know that we'll see a major change in their tone, whether or not they're going to cozy back up to Donald Trump or try to, as they have been, pick some other candidate to run. But this is a huge deal in America that Tucker Carlson's been canned. And it's really good news because he is a hate monger every night.
Yeah, I think Jimmy Fallon said he can think of nearly a billion good reasons why he got fired. Pete Dominic, always good to see you, buddy. I'll speak to you later.
Pete.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Pleasure. Still to come this morning, Queensland's youth justice system labelled the worst in the nation. More on that shock report ahead.
Oh, man, Queensland's youth justice system does not sound like a good system to be put into. All right, there you go. Thank you to David Campbell and Sylvia Jeffries for having me on the show yesterday. You like that bubbly morning talk feel? Seems a little forced when you listen to it on the podcast. That was how I felt while I was hearing it. Plus, I think my dad's 78. I call him the wrong age. He's going to kill me. By the way, I think I'm going to tape an interview with him for tomorrow, as well as a few others, about Joe Biden announcing that he's going to be running for re-election, and get some perspectives from a wide array of people. And of course, I want to hear from you, especially at our hangout on Thursday night, tomorrow night at 8 p.m. It is on. I hope to see you there. Lots of other news to mention and discuss from yesterday. I do want to mention that Jon Carroll trial. It's a really big deal. I feel like to some extent we're very jaded and cynical about Trump ever getting justice, or justice ever getting Trump. But I'm seeing a lot of headlines like this one at Slate. A Trump civil trial is about to start. It's a nightmare for him. Writing at Slate, Robert Katzberg says the first of what will likely be multiple courtroom battles for Donald Trump is about to start after U.S. District Court Senior Judge Lewis Kaplan denied Trump's motion to adjourn the scheduled April 25th trial of the civil assault charges filed against him by Jon Carroll, noting that it was the former president himself who largely, quote, invited or provoked the publicity that he claimed created a need for delay. Judge Kaplan ordered the trial to proceed as scheduled. And folks, the more I read about this judge and this trial, the more interesting and provocative it sounds like it's going to be. Judge Kaplan is not suffering any of Trump's fools. And this case is pretty sound for a case from 1995, an incident from 1995. And a kind of he said, she said that you see playing out in this type of an issue. But Jon Carroll has people that can corroborate her story from that day. And the judge is allowing other women who have accused Trump of assault to testify. And he's allowing the jury, which has been selected, to hear the Access Hollywood tape where he admits to sexual assault. Going back to the Slate article, it reads, the evidence against the former president and the public record seems strong. First, based on Carroll's public interviews, she appears to be an effective advocate who should be a sympathetic witness on her own behalf. In addition, there are a number of witnesses whom Carroll had contemporaneously told about the incident who will corroborate her story. There's also unidentified male DNA on the dress she was wearing when the incident occurred. Finally, Judge Kaplan has allowed into evidence certain of Trump's prior assault conduct toward women, including the infamous Access Hollywood tape. I guess I just kind of summarized that and read it for you. But the other point is that Trump's judges suck. They already screwed up and might have been able to get this trial dismissed, but they missed their opportunity and sat on some evidence for like 3 weeks. And making the courtroom battle even more unfavorable for Trump will be Jon Carroll's attorney, whose name is Roberta Kaplan, who's an experienced, well-regarded civil rights and commercial litigator known for a reasoned demeanor and practical approach, especially in a case where a woman is accused of a man of physically brutalizing her. The contrast between her and Trump's judges, he says, is that Trump's judges get this alpha male persona, and Kaplan's reasonably professionalism will only reinforce Carroll's claims to the jury. I'm telling you, it's going to be a big deal, I think. This case could go very, very badly for Donald Trump. And by the way, yes, you get mixed up with these because he's said it so many times. So many women have accused him of assaulting him, or worse, raping him. And he has said about several of them, she's not my type. I wouldn't, look at her. Does she look like someone I'd be attracted to? Which is, I'm pretty sure that's the least intelligent thing to say when you've been accused of sexually assaulting anyone. You don't say, well, come on, I wouldn't assault that person. That person's not my type. Sometimes he says things that I think make perfect sense to him, but to most people's ears, they're like, whoa, what? And finally, I do want to mention just more details about the Tucker Carlson firing. First of all, apparently, according to Rolling Stone magazine, Fox News keeps these secret Oppo files on their former employees and current employees. And it's a pretty interesting story at Rolling Stone about their corporate head of communications, a woman named Irina Brigante. Go look that one up, because there could be all kinds of stuff that they're holding on to in case Tucker Carlson starts to badmouth Fox News and the senior executives, much less the Murdochs. But he's hired a high-powered attorney to represent him in the case, I don't know what, wrongful firing, I guess. And apparently Don Lemon hired the same lawyer. So we'll see what happens there. But there was other reporting that was super fascinating from a pretty reliable source, Gabriel Sherman, who has great sources and has always been reporting on and about Fox News. But apparently Tucker Carlson's prayer talk may have led to his firing because it freaks Rupert Murdoch out. Fox Corp chair Rupert Murdoch is said to have balked at Carlson's remarks at a Friday night speech, driving another theory about the primetime star's abrupt exit. He doesn't like all that spiritual talk, said a source. Gabriel Sherman writes, 24 hours after Fox News ousted its highest-rated host, the network has yet to explain one of the most shocking defenestrations in cable news history. I'm not going beyond the release, the Fox News spokesman texted yesterday when I asked her for a comment. In this information void, multiple theories about why Fox fired Carlson circulated in the media. Fallout from the $787.5 million Dominion settlement, punishment for vulgar text messages published in Dominion court filings, or a consequence of former Fox producer Abby Grossberg's lawsuit, which alleged Carlson had oversaw a hostile work environment. And I think that corporate communications head has a lot of that kind of oppo stuff to leak out about Tucker Carlson if he starts criticizing them. But none of these potential reasons fully add up, writes Gabriel Sherman in Vanity Fair. Fox News anchor Maria Bartiromo hyped Dominion conspiracies far more than Carlson did, and yet she remains on the air. Fox had access to Carlson's texts and emails in the Dominion lawsuit for months and didn't punish him for it. Fox hosts sued for sexual harassment in the past were fired publicly for cause, but Carlson wasn't. According to a source, Carlson wasn't even fired and remains on the Fox News payroll. But a new theory has emerged. Listen to this. According to a source, Fox Corp chair Rupert Murdoch removed Tucker Carlson over remarks Carlson made during his speech at the Heritage Foundation's 50th anniversary gala on Friday night. Tucker Carlson laced his speech with religious overtones that even Murdoch found too extreme. The source, who was briefed on Murdoch's decision-making, said, Carlson told the Heritage audience that national politics has become a Manichaean battle between good and evil. Carlson said that people advocating for transgender rights and DEI programs want to destroy America, and they could not be persuaded with facts. We could say that and stop engaging in these totally fraudulent debates. I've tried. That doesn't work, he said. The answer, Carlson suggested, was prayer. Quote, I've concluded it might be worth taking just 10 minutes out of your busy schedule to say a prayer for the future, and I hope you will, he said. Well, guess what? That stuff freaks Rupert Murdoch out. He doesn't like all the spiritual talk. And finally, and most fascinatingly from this article, and I think it's worth me reading it, Rupert Murdoch was perhaps unnerved by Carlson's messianism because it echoed the end times worldview of Rupert Murdoch's ex-fiancée, Anne Leslie Smith, according to the source. In my May cover story, Gabriel Sherman writes in Vanity Fair, I reported that Murdoch and Smith called off their 2-week engagement because Smith had told people Carlson was a, quote, messenger from God. Murdoch had seen Carlson and Smith discuss religion firsthand. In late March, Tucker Carlson had dinner at Rupert Murdoch's Bel Air Vineyard with Murdoch and Smith, according to the source. During the dinner, Smith pulled out a Bible and started reading passages from the book of Exodus, the source said. Rupert just sat there and stared, the source said. A few days after the dinner, Murdoch and Smith called off the wedding. By taking Carlson off the air, Murdoch was also taking away his ex's favorite show. So basically, it's all just like Succession. I don't know who is emulating who, but that show on HBO, which I've now watched every episode of, is so similar to the drama that is played out in the Murdoch family with Fox News that it's eerie. Anyway, that's the latest on Tucker Carlson and everything else that I've got for you in today's news. And now it's time to get to today's guest, who is really great. Adam Sank is one of the most recognized and accomplished openly gay stand-up comedians in the country. He's been on NBC's Last Comic Standing, The Today Show, Fox's Last, CBS News, VH1's I Love the 2000s and Best Week Ever, CNN's At This Hour, and so many other programs, as well as Sirius-XM, where he was a fill-in host. He's put out a couple of comedy albums, and for 15 years he performed regularly at clubs, special events, festivals throughout New York area and beyond. In addition to being a comic, he's hosted a podcast for years, The Adam Sank Show. He's mostly retired from both comedy and podcasting, insane, but he suggests you friend him on Facebook and look him up and follow him on all his social media, which is all linked in the show notes. But like I said earlier, I think this is a really great conversation with a guy around my age who grew up around the time I grew up, but had a very different kind of life than I obviously have, and yet there's so much similarity. We get along really great for two guys that really haven't talked very much ever, if not in a long time. And I should say that this does get pretty filthy at times. I don't know. It depends on what your threshold is, but we're two guys, two comedians, and their subject of sex comes up a lot. Gay sex, but I thought it was all mostly important and hopefully doesn't offend or upset anybody, but did want to mention that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time ever on the show, Adam Sank.
Yeah, there he is, Adam Sank. It's been way too long since we talked like this. And I will say, I don't think we know each other that well, but you're definitely a person who, for whatever reason, I see a lot of your posts on social media and I love them. And it's like one of those relationships where you know the person, but then you love to see them on social media. So I don't know what your perspective then is of me, but I feel like it's probably similar.
It is similar. I mean, I think I know you more as a fan of yours and as someone who's always been familiar with you and what you're up to than like an actual acquaintance. I don't know that we've ever had a one-on-one conversation that's lasted more than a couple minutes. I do remember years ago when I hosted a birthday roast for Frank DeCaro on OutQ.
That's right.
And you were one of the roasters. And I think I made some terrible Mr. Clean joke because I didn't really know what else to say about you other than the fact that you were bald.
It's weird because then my recollection is we went out and after that we had sex.
I mean, I wish that was my fantasy. I didn't know it was yours as well.
I just thought that would be a funny joke to say after we both said, we really didn't know each other. But isn't that how it works in gay male culture? Clear up some misconceptions since I made that joke about sex and men and whether or not, you know, what relationship basis there needs to be. I suppose it's a really gross generalization to talk about gay men's sexuality, isn't it?
I mean, yes and no. Men are pigs, I think, no matter what our sexual orientation is, relative to women. And of course, that's another gross generalization. But in general, men tend to be on the hunt for sex. Not that we all have it all the time, but most of us want it all the time. And I do think one thing that's different about gay men in terms of friendship is that most of our friends, in my experience, most of my gay friends started out as hookups, especially when I was younger.
Well,
so it's like you meet the person, you sleep with them, you see if maybe you have like a romantic spark, you don't. And so you just become friends. And sometimes you become lifelong friends.
So I came up in New York City in the late 90s, early aughts. Is that what we say, aughts, for the 2000s?
I guess. There's never been a good word for it.
Right. And so that was kind of, I think, peak AIDS, at least late 90s.
Well, peak AIDS was late 80s to mid 90s.
Okay. So, but anyway, the point is that was when I was around a lot of gay men, lived in the Upper West Side, did comedy, was a personal trainer. There was gay men everywhere. And so I felt like then I knew a lot more. Now I live in the suburbs and I'm 47. And so my question to you is how much has changed in the culture and how much changes in the age? Are you the same person you were now as you were in your 20s? I don't even know how old you are, but I feel like you're over 40 or late 30s.
I'm 52, actually.
Holy shit. So like how much has changed for you and how much has changed culturally in terms of like gay culture? Is that even, I'm saying you're one person in your 20s and another person in your 40s and now 50s? Right. No, or am I off? Do you get more domesticated and calm down?
Hopefully we all grow and evolve and get smarter and make better decisions as we get older. I definitely, I often think like I would love to have the stamina and the energy I had in my 20s, but I would never want the brain that I had then. I have so much more wisdom, agency. I know how to do things, whatever life throws at me. I'm like, all right, this is kind of like when that other thing happened and I know how to handle it. Like I was just a fucking anxious mess for most of my 20s and 30s. And I feel like it wasn't until I got to my mid to late 40s that I felt like, a certain level of of maturity and mastery of things. So that's how I've changed. And definitely like worked on myself as far as like my temper and my expectations of other people. And, you know, for a long time, I had this thing where if I had a falling out with a friend, that was it forever. You know, if you pissed me off or hurt me or even disagreed with me in some cases, like that was the end of the friendship. And
I still have that.
You do have that?
No, I don't. But I know exactly. No, I think I probably cared too much about what people think to really sustain that. Yeah.
It's not a healthy way to live. It's not productive. It doesn't serve you if you go through life. And I think one of the things that taught me the most, there's a book called The Velvet Rage that almost every gay man reads at a certain point in his life. I wish I could come up with the author's name off the top of my head.
I'll look it up. Go ahead. Tell me.
But he's a psychologist who specializes in treating gay men. And it's basically, it explains the gay male psyche. Right? It explains that. Say again.
Alan Downs, a clinical psychologist. The Velvet Rage, Overcoming the Pain of Growing Up Gay in a Straight Man's World. What? I mean, I'm fast. I'd never heard of it. And go ahead. Sorry.
It's such an important book because what it teaches you is that when you're a gay man from any generation, but particularly, you know, pre-now, let's say, you're taught that you're wrong from the earliest age. Everything about you is wrong, not just your sexuality, but, you know, as a group, we tend to be different from other boys in terms of our interests, in terms of our affinities, our emotionality. Like there's all kinds of ways in which we differ. And we're told, even if we have great supportive liberal parents, we're told by society, like there's something wrong with you. And we internalize that as shame. And therefore, if someone criticizes us, even the tiniest bit, it's like, how dare you criticize me? Like we don't have thick skin at all. We are so easily wounded because we grew up in this defensive, anxious stance of like, please just love me and accept me and don't criticize me. And when you learn that like criticism isn't hatred, criticism isn't like shame necessarily. Criticism can be really helpful and true. And once, you know, you learn that, then you can like have a relationship where someone says, hey, I don't really like it when you do that thing. And it doesn't mean you hate me. It just means like, this is your experience and I have to take that in.
Jesus, I totally get what you're saying. It's never occurred to me. It's
deep.
Yeah, so that's how criticism can manifest for someone who was told they were always broken and always wrong. As you get criticism, you burn that person down or you cut them out because you don't want that, what you would consider like poison or some negativity in your life. But really, it doesn't have to be all that way. It can.
We look for people who feel safe to us, right?
Yeah.
But there are people who are safe and who still sometimes disagree or get angry or get upset, and because we all make mistakes and we're all fallible, and to accept that as like as a disagreement as opposed to an attack is really hard for gay men to learn.
I love you and I respect you, but I really don't like when you do that, or I really disagree with you thinking that. But I love you and respect you, and I don't want our relationship to be broken or change. I want you to be able to hear that I love you and respect you, but I hate when you do that. And I really think that I disagree with you for thinking that. Is that what you were saying here?
Yes. So now imagine a relationship of two gay men, two people who carry this baggage from childhood, and they're trying to negotiate the things that people always negotiate in relationships. Every time they disagree, it's like it's World War III.
Yeah, and I want to say, without knowing the guy's work and without being a psychologist, that's not exclusive to being a gay man at all. However, It's very common for gay men. I think that's probably what this psychologist would say, and probably what most people think, because I don't want anybody to think. There's probably a lot of people who can relate to this that are either women or straight or whatever they, however they identify, I'm guessing.
Right. I mean, we all had parents, and everybody wants mommy's approval and daddy's approval, and we want them to tell us that they love us and support us. And when they don't, it's very painful. And so when that happens in adult relationships, we're like, it sometimes for some of us, it brings us back to when like mommy was never happy with me or daddy was never proud of me or whatever.
Sure. But it's also, even if mommy and daddy are proud of you and accept you, in this case for being gay, that doesn't mean that the dudes in 7th grade are, much less at your corporate retreat or daily, whatever your work is. Like, you can be safe and feel safe at home. But the moment you leave, if you're on the school bus or wherever else, if you're being called this and that, there's nothing your parents can really, it's nice to have a stable home, but.
So you literally just sang my life story. 7th grade school bus is when everything fell apart for me.
I'm sorry.
Because I was pretty sheltered in terms of like the town I grew up in, the elementary school I went to. I had tons of friends. Nobody had a problem with me or the fact that I was different. But 7th grade, man, I went to a new school and suddenly I was on a school bus every morning where I was terrorized every single day. I arrived at school in tears every single day for a year. And the prevailing thought then among adults was, you have to just let this happen and the kid will toughen up and learn to navigate this on his own, which is such terrible thinking. And it really fucked
Either that
me
or
up.
become a comedian.
Well, yes, exactly. How do I get them to stop bullying me? I make them laugh.
Yeah. When did you said, because I was different, like before 7th grade, you were different, but you weren't bullied. What is different?
Oh my God. I hated sports. I wasn't interested in Star Wars or Star Trek or any of the things that my little boyfriends were into. I loved indoor activities. I loved baking. I mean, I was every musical theater. From the time I was very young, I was acting and singing in musical theater. And that was my passion. Organized sports seemed so stupid and pointless to me. And I hated being forced to do them. So I was like the gay stereotype in every way you can imagine. Plus I was effeminate, like way more than I am as an adult. That's another thing that got beaten out of me, is like, I was like kind of a swishy little kid. And I learned along the way that like life is easier if you butch it up a little bit. And so it's not like it's not an affect for me now. And it's not like I'm hyper masculine, but I'm more masculine now than I was as a child because I learned I had to be.
That's really interesting and very also sad that you have to. I never really considered. I don't know. I'm pretty easy case. I'm very typical dude when I was younger. I think outside of being
you're lucky.
Yeah,
it's always easier
I was
to be
small. I was bullied for being small, but I quickly developed humor, and it definitely didn't damage me too much. I don't think. I just wasn't as good at sports as I wanted to be, but that still, wasn't. I guess that was as hard as it got for me. So it sounds brutal. It sounds like your childhood was pretty brutal.
Like I said, it was pretty great until 7th grade, and then it was brutal for a couple years, and then I went back to public school, which I never should have left in the first place because everyone knew me. Everyone knew my family. My father was everyone's pediatrician, and they loved him. And I was, it was kind of like, oh yeah, that Sank kid's a little faggy, but he's okay. But when I went to this new school in another town with strangers, they were just like, no, we do not accept you. So when I went back to public school in 10th grade, things got a lot better.
When did you come out at that first school? When did you come out to people?
Oh my God. So I have a weird coming out story because this is different from most gay guys that I've talked to. I was sexual with other boys from like 7th grade on, but I didn't think that made me gay.
Oh, me too.
Everyone else thought I was.
Was my mic on?
What?
I said, oh, me too. Wait, is my mic on?
So did you, Pete, ever like experiment with dudes?
No, never. Never did. And I do make a lot of jokes like, I've kissed a lot of guys, but I'm not gay. But in your case, like that, and a lot of people make those jokes. It's the case. I'm happy to talk about as openly as you can ask me anything about my sexuality, but I think yours is more interesting. The
reason I ask is because a lot of straight guys fooled around with me between like 7th and 12th grades, a lot. And
I did like some adjacent, like the gayest thing, I guess, and it's not even, but when we were like 11 and had a sleepover, me and my two buddies played darts naked and like wrestled a little bit.
Yeah.
And then had full on sex for 3 days. No, that was it. We just played darts naked. And I do remember that. We all remember that. And I bring it up every opportunity I can because it makes one of them uncomfortable. But that's it, I think. That's it. And I never kissed a guy except on stage in like a role. And it was just a peck.
I would call that like homoerotic play.
Yeah, sure.
And most boys engage in that in some form, right? With me and my friends, it would start out as like mutual masturbation, or we would be jerking ourselves off, but in the same room. And then that would lead to something else. And it wasn't like full on anal. I mean, I never did that. That was like too advanced for me, but like some oral sex and a lot of manual sex, never kissing, never anything intimate. It was
That's
very
gay.
What's that?
Kissing is gay.
Yeah, actually, the idea of kissing another dude never appealed to me until long after I came out, because I never saw it. And
that's fascinating. That's interesting, because we didn't see it. Now it's almost like you don't notice it as much in media or in public, I feel.
Yes. I mean, there's been a revolution in terms of entertainment. You know, we didn't have Will and Grace. We didn't have Ellen. We didn't have Queer as Folk. Any of the things that have happened in the past 30 years didn't exist when I was growing up. There was no physical affection between men. And when I first came out, which was in college, and I would go to a gay bar and see guys dancing with each other and kissing and holding hands, it freaked me out. Like I had sucked a dick many times, and that felt totally normal to me. But seeing two guys kiss, I was like, whoa. That's weird. And it took me a while to get used to that.
How do you explain that?
Well, so to finish what I was originally saying, I didn't think that made me gay. I thought this is something guys do in private and don't tell anyone about, because I had a lot of evidence to support that. I had a lot of friends that were definitely not gay and are still not gay, that would fool around with me. So I just thought this is like a way that boys play and get off, but it doesn't mean we're gay. And I had like crushes on girls. I dated girls. I had girlfriends. I ended up having sex with a bunch of girls in later high school and college. So I thought the fact that I was capable of having sex with a girl and having feelings for a girl meant that I was straight or possibly bisexual. Sometimes I would allow myself to think, oh, maybe you're bi, but I never thought I was gay because I had an idea of what gay was, and it wasn't me. Meanwhile, everyone on the planet thought I was gay, but I didn't think so. And then when I was in college, I've told this story on stage before. I joined a fraternity, and I guess it was 2 years into college, I had met a gay guy and hooked up with him. And he was like, I want to take you to this place called, I went to the University of Michigan. He's like, I want to take you to Sagatuck, Michigan. It's this place that 4th of July weekend, it's totally gay. And we're going to go to a gay bar. And I was totally flipped out because I was like, I've never done this before. I'm not gay. I don't think I can handle this. I was thinking maybe I'm bi. And I went with him to Sagatuck, and I walked into this gay bar, and the first person I see is a fraternity brother of mine. A really hot, masculine, like gym rat fraternity brother of mine that nobody would have ever thought was gay, except of course now I would think he was. But at the time, he didn't fit any of the stereotypes that we thought of in the 90s. And I went right up to him, and he was like, yeah, I'm gay. And he was totally chill about it and totally matter of fact. And I looked at him and I said, I'm gay too. And that's the first time I'd ever said it to myself or anyone else. And that's it. That's how I came out. I was like, oh, you can be gay and be like that dude. You don't have to be like fucking Liberace, which is all I ever knew. All I knew growing up was either you were hugely effeminate, not that there's anything wrong with that, but it wasn't certainly wasn't my ideal. You have to be Liberace or Harvey Fierstein or Paul Lynde or Charles Nelson Riley. These were the options. Or if you were a straight acting gay guy, then you were dying of AIDS, like Rock Hudson or Freddie Mercury.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't understand that you could be gay and be healthy and also like what I considered normal.
That's crazy.
Once I saw that, I was like, okay, I can do this.
That's crazy. That's a crazy story. And I bet you it's fairly common for men our age that grew up during that time. Because as you're talking there, I keep wanting to say that's not the way it is most places for most people these days. I'm sure it is still for a lot of people in a lot of places, including very, quote, gay-friendly places. But I feel like we've made a lot of progress along those lines. But what's your thoughts?
Well, so much has changed. I mean, first of all, AIDS is no longer a health crisis in the United States. Almost nobody has AIDS. There are many, many, many people living with HIV, including me, but we take one pill a day and we're completely healthy. And that's the end of that story. There's been a revolution in HIV/AIDS medicine since the mid-90s.
Jesus, I did not realize that you were HIV positive. Do you identify as HIV positive?
Sure, if it comes up.
Yeah.
I've talked about it openly before.
I was about to say, how did you avoid contracting AIDS? But now all I want to know is how when and how. I mean, that was a death sentence, or at least it's going to be really bad for most people growing up our age. I was terrified of it. I remember the first time I went down on a woman, I called my brother, panicked. I was like, do you think I got, he's like, he was so thoughtful too. He is so thoughtful. And he's like, listen, anything's possible, but bro, highly doubtful. And blah, blah, blah. But the point is, I remember the fear, and I was straight. I wasn't with men sexually or many women. But the point is, like, now I have to ask you about that part of your life and that story and how it unfolded. And obviously,
well, first of all, I totally identify with what you're saying, because we grew up amid a very justifiable AIDS panic. And it was a death sentence for a while there, and hundreds of thousands of millions of people died. And they didn't just die. First, they suffered and, had terrible, terrible illnesses to contend with, and then died. So the terror was real, and it was always there for me. My very first boyfriend, my first real boyfriend, this is in 91. I'm still in college. While we're dating, we find out that he's positive. And so we both have to accept that, he's going to die within 10 years. And we also have to navigate, how are we going to have sex? Are we going to have sex? Are we going to continue to be in this relationship? This is my first boyfriend ever. And somehow I decided to stay with him. And we stayed together for a year, and it was probably the healthiest relationship I ever had. We were very in love and very, very good to each other. And, we used condoms, and I was always the top. I never went down on him. That we took every precaution possible. I still was in a panic. I got tested every single month, but that was sort of my first exposure to it. P.S. He is alive and well. Never been hospitalized, never had a problem. Great. He's fine, which is a testament to both him being a long-term survivor, but also how much the medicine has changed.
Right.
So for the next 10 or 15 years, I was really, really careful. And the problem with safe sex strategy at that time is it was either abstain or use condoms every single time that you have any kind of penetrative sex. And that is not a long-term strategy for anyone.
Right.
It just isn't. And
it's also not it's just, not only is it not I'm sorry to just interrupt you, but I mean,
please.
I just can't, I was just thinking about how hard relationships are to sustain, no matter who you are. To have that be an added complexity with someone that you're in a committed relationship with, I don't even know where to begin to imagine what that must be like. And most people don't, I think. But now things obviously are different, but gosh, it must have been just so much more harder to be concerned about that all the time.
Yeah. And there was just always this tension and fear. And what happens is what experts call condom fatigue. And you just get tired of always being so safe and careful, because that's not really what sex is for. Sex is about losing yourself, and being intimate, really intimate with another person and feeling every part of them. And I started taking chances, and when I tested positive in 2005, I was shocked because I wasn't taking a lot of chances. And I thought the chances that I was taking were negligible. I thought that I'm not no one's ever ejaculating inside me ever. So I'm safe, and of course that's a fallacy. Someone doesn't have to ejaculate for them to have a tiny bit of, pre-cum that has virus in it. And, I still don't know exactly how I got it, but I know that I wasn't following all the rules. And
I'm not even sure how my wife got pregnant with our first daughter. So, I mean, things you never know. You don't know. People don't also know how they got COVID. I'm kind of joking, but you don't always know. How, COVID, I think, was a perfect example. How did I get that? I didn't even see anybody. You don't necessarily know, even with a lot of other things that would seem somewhat easy to identify. Go ahead.
And I was slutty. I mean, let's be honest. I had many partners. And so right there, I was exposing myself to a lot of potential infection. Fortunately for me, by 2005, there were so many options as far as HIV meds. And I was one of the first people to be offered a 1 pill a day. At that point, most people were taking 2 or more pills a day. My doctor said to me, hey, the 2 pills you're on have just been combined into 1. We're going to try that. And it was fine. And my viral load stayed undetectable and my T cells stayed very high. And those are the 2 measures that you check. Every 6 months, I go to the doctor, I get my blood taken, I get tested for everything, all STDs, liver function, kidney function, all the stuff that you would get tested at well, not the STDs, I guess, but you'd get tested for your basic health. And the 2 measures they look at carefully are viral load, which is how many copies of the virus they can find in a unit of blood, and T cells, which are the healthy white blood cells that you want to be within a certain range in order to fight infection. My viral load has been consistently undetectable ever since I started meds. That means they literally can't find it. They cannot find the virus, which also means I am not infectious to anybody else. And I'm not at risk of developing.
Well, what are the ethics then with dating?
So that has changed. I should, before I answer that question, let me just add.
Yeah.
Within the last 10 years, they've now added a new protocol called PrEP. PrEP is for people who are HIV negative. They take 1 pill a day and it prevents them from ever getting infected.
Oh, wow.
Most gay guys today who are sexually active and are not positive are on PrEP. So now you're talking about someone like me who's undetectable having sex with someone else who's on a medication that prevents them from getting infected. So it's a double protection. Now, to answer your question, when I first tested positive, I felt it was very important that I tell everybody that I did anything with. Over time, as people's fears have abated so much around this virus, and as with the increasing use of PrEP and just sort of a greater understanding of how you can and can't get infected, it's now kind of a don't ask, don't tell thing. If somebody asks me the question, I will of course tell them. And I do try to get it out. If I want to date someone, I definitely want to let them know sooner than later, because if they have an issue with it, which some people still do, I don't want to get emotionally involved, but I would say that 80 to 90% of the guys that I have sex with and or date are I don't care. I'm on PrEP, or I'm positive too, or I just don't care.
What about in your dating profile on apps or online or anything? Is there lingo or symbols or all kinds of
I'm
stuff?
not on the apps at the moment, but when I was on the hookup apps, I always had the positive thing checked. I mean, I've been open about this publicly since 2010, so I really have no reason to cover this up. I mean, you can Google Adam Sank, and one of the first things that'll come up is interviews I've given about being HIV positive. So it's out there.
I swear to God, I did Google that, but I'm sorry I didn't know. But I'm glad I didn't, because I'm glad that we're talking about this. This has turned out to be a conversation I wasn't expecting, but I'm so happy because I'm really getting enlightened and educated, and it's a conversation I think I should have had a long time ago. So I'm really happy we're having it. I have one more question. about kind of gay sex. And then I want to talk with you about, masculinity and all this stuff. But my question is so like elementary, and I know it's generalized. It's just a generalization. But if you're, and I know you're not speaking for all gay men, but if you're in a relationship, in a serious, committed, or just a solid relationship, you're living with your partner, your gay man, and you're happy with each other. You're in a good space, if you will. How much sex is there? Because I always think about where my sex drive is at, and how I always want it. And most guys I know are the same way. And if you're in a good spot with your wife, you want it. And the truth is they don't want it as much. And I'm generalizing a lot here. I'm sure there are exceptions, and that's great. Right. But I'm always like, man, I bet you gay guys, if they're in a good space, like they like each other, whatever, even if they've been together a long time, I bet you they're always getting each other off. I bet you it's all the time. That's always been my guess. I know there's a different answer for each one, but I always like to ask.
So my answer is this. I think most long-term straight couples I know, most long-term gay couples I know are similar to most long-term straight couples I know, right? In that they don't have much sex with each other, if any. The difference is
so hard for me to believe. Okay, go ahead.
The difference is in the male couples, not all of them, but most of the ones I know who have been together for, 5, 10, 15, 25 years, they do have sex, just not with each other. They have an open relationship. They have some kind of understanding. Maybe it's when they're in different cities. Maybe it's a don't ask, don't tell. Maybe it's completely open and they bring people home. They bring home a third or a fourth into the bedroom, or they tell each other about their sexcapades. There's all kinds of arrangements, but it is understood as men that we are sexual and that we want to have sex a lot. And just like in straight relationships, after a lot of years of being with the same person, that passion, that, excitement to just go off on each other's bodies, it tends to fade, even in a really good relationship. What I have tried to do, I've never had a relationship that's lasted more than 4 years, but what I always tell because some of my friends who are in long-term relationships are like, oh yeah, we never have sex at all. And I'm like, why can't you just jerk off together and watch porn? Keep some element of sexuality between you. Don't turn your partner into a eunuch or into a monk. They're just they're just not into it. But they'll get a blowjob in the steam room at the gym every day.
Oh, I know that. I worked at Equinox. I worked there, and I was 20, and I didn't know anything about gay culture, and I got a crash course. It was unbelievable.
Did you see things you didn't want to see?
Oh my God. I've told this many times before, but yes, I'd have to go in and do rounds, and they actually, I think it's probably the chronology is the first I experienced it. I love the steam room. I've joined the gym. It was Equinox. It was a really premier gym. I couldn't afford to be a member there, but I worked there at the front desk and then later as a personal trainer. But the point is, I was a really nice place to be. So I was I'd never been in a steam room in my life probably. So I was oh, this is awesome. And I'm there in the steam room, and there's one other guy in there, and he opened, he was sitting all the way across from me, and he opened his towel and he had a full bone. And I was what the fuck? I was so shocked and offended and terrified. It was a definite, I felt like it was an assault. Wildly inappropriate. I got up, I walked out, he walked out, I got in one shower, he got in a shower next to me, I get out, he gets out, I obviously remember it like it was yesterday, I was 21. He nods to go back in, and I'm no, and I ran home. I remember running home and sitting there and questioning my sexuality. I was did I like that? Aww. Did I want that? Did I invite that? Which is all healthy and normal. But then I knew what was going on in there. But yeah, that happened.
He was wrong in that he wasn't properly reading the cues from you. I won't do that. I won't expose myself to someone unless it's very clear to me that they want me to. I think it's wrong to have people. I
think it's wrong for any two people to have sex in a public space, generally in the middle of the mall, like if you're in your car hiding or something, I don't care. But like in a hygiene, like no one wants to sit down in the steam room where some guy just came all over the way. Like, I think that's disgusting. I get it. I know why it happens. It's two dudes that are gay in the steam room. But I still think that was like still wrong. But I agree with you on a theoretical level, but it's such a big part of gay culture that like the gym is where you hook up. And usually, I've never been a big steam room queen. I prefer a shower because you can clean yourselves and the shower after you're done. You don't have to like just leave like a puddle of jizz. Well, at least I can wear flip-flops in the shower so I don't have to step in your jizz puddle. But like you can't do that in the steam room. You're sitting down on a towel and I got to go in your jizz puddle. I don't know how many people I've lost on this part of the conversation, but it's true. But it's reality. I also go to a gym that's like, I mean, there's virtually no straight guys at my gym, so it's kind of understood, and very few women. I worked out. I had a New York sports membership. And I mean, I knew at this point, I've been in the city 10 years and I knew everything about, but like, and I'm completely comfortable. So it didn't matter. But I remember the New York sports allowed me, work out in any New York sports. And I had a gig at Gotham, which is on 23rd Street. So I was like, I'll go in there and work out before the gayest neighborhood in the world. And I go in and I work out at that gym and I'll never forget it. Cause I mean, I'm sure I made this a joke in my act, but like when I walked in there, every head turned and I felt like a celebrity. And all it was like, haven't seen this guy before. And I just ate it all up. Too. I loved it. I didn't care at all, but
you're a hot guy. I mean, you're gonna get cruised.
Oh, I've always been. I just wish someone would have told me. It was hard when I was really young, and then everything changed, and I didn't think about it. But like, I didn't understand the difference between anything, and I didn't get it.
Now you know how women feel.
Well, it's so funny you say that
every day of their lives.
Yeah, no, it's funny that you said it because I remember I was pretty old when I first felt harassed, really uncomfortable next to a man, a gay guy who I'd invited to go with me to like a basketball game. We were professional colleagues at CNN. And like he wouldn't stop looking at it. It's making me feel really uncomfortable at him. And I remember being mad at him and then going, I'm sure I've done that to many women. He wasn't doing anything really inappropriate, just looking at me a lot and like maybe touching a little too much or something. But I was like, I'm sure I've done that to women. Now I know how. Exactly what you just said. Yeah.
Yeah. And now we're in an age where consent really needs to be explicit. And that's tricky for gay men because our culture is so sexual and it's considered perfectly reasonable, or at least it used to be, to go up to a strange guy and just like grab his butt. Like nowadays, you really can't do that anymore.
Even like anywhere? Like if you were at a party, would that be weird with a bunch of gay guys?
It wouldn't be weird to me, but I'm not someone who has an issue with being touched. Like if I'm touched by someone I don't want to be touched by, I'll just be like, no, thanks. It doesn't traumatize me. But there are people for whom it's a real problem, and you shouldn't just touch someone without asking for permission. But it's hard to ask permission when you're in a hypersexualized environment. It sort of is that thing where it kills the mood, and a lot of times you think you're getting a green light when you're not. And so I always say the key is to move slowly, right? Like I don't like, there's a bar in New York City, a very popular gay leather bar where there's a lot of like public sex happening. And I never like it when someone's first move is to grab my dick. Like that is not a first move. You want to put your hand on my shoulder. You want to like say hi. You want to even flick my nipple, which I don't like, but okay. That's not quite as invasive as like grabbing on like it's fucking like it's a stress ball.
That's horrible.
And squeezing hard. That doesn't feel good. And it's totally invasive. And I haven't even seen you yet to make a decision as to whether or not I'm into you. Like some people are just fucking stupid.
I had that happen to me one time in my life. And it was literally, I'll never forget it. Because it was literally at that gym. I was working there and it was a guy I worked with. I was like, what? I was like shocked that he touched me. No, we're just walking by. He just walked by me and just grabbed me. And I was like, what? He was older. I was like, he started laughing. I was like, where is that funny? Like,
yeah, that's pure on sexual assault.
So let me shift to talking about this issue, which is, I wonder, how much commonality there is with straight and gay men at this point on this issue. But something I talk to with a lot of heterosexual identifying guys is dealing with their own emotional state, being emotional, being sensitive, being vulnerable, because we still live in a culture where that is seen as being weak. And if you believe that, I think there's a lot of science out there that says you are going to be living with a lot of anguish. If you don't tell anybody what's going on because you're afraid of looking weak, you can end up too often taking your own life, much less just being really depressed. There's a huge issue with men in America, especially, that I think we can connect with a lot of other larger issues about masculinity, about looking tough. I mean, for one thing, I mean, it's so pathetic. I don't have to tell you, probably anybody, this, but it's like even to drive a small car or an EV is somehow effeminate. Like, forget about how you talk or how you dress, the beer that you drink. And by the way, I'm not going to exclude myself. I've made these jokes and still make these jokes in the comfort of someone I know doesn't get bothered, but like, nice tight pants or something. But the car you drive, I mean, it's everything. And I know you have a lot to say about this. And I think this is probably the most important issue that we and any men can engage in and diagnose as a dire mental health crisis with men, specifically men in America, and maybe even more specifically men of a certain age. But you can talk about it however you want.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things I really love about being gay. And probably the number one thing is the friendships that I have with other men. I never had that before I came out. I never felt close emotionally to another man. And being able to really confide in another guy and cry in front of him and like be vulnerable and talk about like difficult shit. That's something most straight men and probably even a lot of gay and bi men don't get to do because it's been ingrained in them that they can't do that, it's weak, it's effeminate, it's possibly homosexual. It's contrary, the strong silent type. The John Wayne type is supposed to be the ideal. And that is such an unhealthy way to go through life, to have all of your feelings repressed and never express what's really going on and never reach out to another person and say, like, I need you. I need your help right now. I need you to listen to me right now. Women do this very well. And women have fantastic friendships relative to men, much better friendships than we do. But gay men have much better friendships than straight men. And I really feel for straight guys. One of the things I most loved about doing stand-up all those years that I was doing it, on a regular basis is all the straight guy friends I met. I never had that growing up because straight comedians tend to be, first of all, not homophobic at all.
Right.
And also really curious, like genuinely curious about gay guys. They want to know like what we do in bed and what anal sex feels like.
Because comedians, all comedians, gender, sexual, are curious by their nature because that's how you get material.
Yes. And I love straight guy humor. I love like those gross teenage comedies. I love Animal House. I grew up with that. So for me, it was such a pleasure connecting to straight guys on that level through comedy. But I think what you're talking about is a real crisis in America. And I think, the school shootings that we're seeing are maybe not all of them, but many or most of them, I think, are a result of someone in crisis who can't express to anyone, who hasn't been allowed to express to anyone. And I
would add to that, not to interrupt, but I would argue that the suicide, shootings, same thing. I mean, it's a lot with a lot of young men. I mean, gay and trans, especially, by the way, because there is an identity crisis as an adolescent. But certainly, I think you're talking more about just not your sexuality, just having to repress all your feelings, that any issue that you're having.
Yeah. And I think it also makes for difficult marriages. I think it's hard to stay married to, for a woman to stay married to a man who never shares anything about himself, who's just a wall. So I do think that this is a problem that needs to be explored. And of course, the MAGA movement is reinforcing these norms of what it means to be a man and masculinity. And that's why there's such an attack on trans and non-binary people right now, because they're so threatened by the idea of being anything but this very, stolid traditional male.
I have a lot more to ask and say about that, but the reason I don't want to tell, and there's some truth to this, a lot, as a matter of fact, the reason I don't want to tell my wife of 22 years, Adam, that I'm worried about money or that I'm concerned about any number of things is I don't want to look weak. I don't want her to think that I'm weak, that I can't support this family or pull my weight or do certain things. This is not serious, but I do wish I try really hard at being able to make home repairs. And I'm not really good. I'm not good at it. I get it done, but it's crooked. It doesn't work. The railing I built on the front porch, broke when my wife leaned against it. I'm not emasculated. I was so humiliated that I was unable to fix that the right way, to make this much money. I don't want her to think that I'm weak. Therefore, she'll be unattracted and uninterested in me. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I sympathize with you. I mean, I think that we need to redefine what it means to be strong and what it means to be weak. Vulnerability to me is a strength. Being able to say I'm not really good at this thing. I'm good at this thing and I'm confident about this, this, and this, but this is an area where I really need help. I don't know what I'm doing. I think that is, to me, that is so attractive when a man is honest and self-aware, as opposed to just being tough and being a cool customer who never gets rattled or never. I mean, none of us want to be with someone who's a mess, but part of being human is to get messy sometimes.
You're absolutely right about that. And by the way,
to not know how to do everything.
My wife has always said the reason why she likes me is because of how sensitive I am and how I open up. But to be clear, I don't always, because I'm afraid of looking weak to some extent. And by the way, I realize I just said that whole railing story, and I realize my asshole listeners are now going to use it against me. How's that railing that your wife, I know who you are, and I'm waiting for you. Okay. So more on that.
But I identify with that, by the way. I'm terrible with my hands. I'm not a handy guy. I can't fix things. I'm not good. I could never paint my own apartment, which isn't even that difficult. Well, and it bothers the shit out of me that I can't do those things, because I do feel like as a man, I'm supposed to be able to. So if I'm gay and I feel that way, I imagine it's only more compounded for someone who's straight.
I think it's a big deal when it comes to physical strength, income earning ability, and kind of, minor, much less major home repairs. I mean, I think that the men who are really solid in all three of those qualities, those guys are perfect. Those guys are perfect straight guys, much less guys in general. They can fix anything. They make a lot of money. And what was the third one? They're really strong. They're in good shape. They take good care of themselves. Those guys are perfect guys.
See, to me, it's all about dick size.
Are you being serious?
I think if you have a big dick, you automatically have a built-in confidence that you just carry through with you throughout your life. And I mean, I say this as someone who doesn't have one. I feel like my whole life would be different and better if I had a big dick. Well, but that's not something I can control.
I feel like that means that the converse of that is also true, that the smaller your car, the bigger your dick, because you're that confident in that car, huh? Probably. Am I right, folks? 2 Chevy Volts.
Probably.
I'll have you know. No, my joke is, my own dick joke is, no one's ever been surprised. No one's ever been disappointed. You see my body and you're like, yeah, that's what I imagined. I'm not surprised either way. Okay. Very closely personal. All right. Let's, what else before I let you go? We've been talking for an hour and
so we were, before we went live, we were talking about toxic masculinity, about this phrase, toxic masculinity, which is very much a product of the left, right? This idea
naming it.
Pardon me?
Naming it.
Yes, and this idea that any stereotypical male behavior is toxic. This is something I take issue with.
Oh.
I do think there are good things about being masculine. I think being confident, being competitive, having for me, wisdom is masculine. There are certain things that I think, we shouldn't be punishing men for aspiring to. And what's happened in gay male culture is, first of all, we're not even supposed to say gay anymore. We're supposed to say queer. And it's this huge umbrella that includes trans people and non-binary people and people who are gender fluid and sexually fluid. And for someone of my generation, that feels a little bit like a loss, because there was something very special about being part of a community that was just gay men, and where we had our own norms and our own sort of style and the way that we liked things to appear. And I realized that is exclusive, and it excludes people who very much deserve to be part of the community and have their voices heard and have their rights respected and all that stuff. Politically, I'm 100% on board. Sexually, and in terms of like the kind of spaces I like to hang out, I like being with guys. I just do. And I think no one would ever suggest that a female only space was somehow harmful or negative, or that they shouldn't have that. I think women need their own spaces, and it's particularly queer women. So why can't we have our own space too?
Is that I don't know what the issue you're talking about, but I don't know if I disagree with you or not, but when you talk about there's nothing wrong with being masculine, and you talked about the words confident, wise, and competitive, those aren't gender specific.
They shouldn't be. No.
So I guess how you define masculinity is a little different for different people. But when you say there's nothing wrong with being masculine, I guess I'm not sure. I don't even really understand the difference between those two these days, masculine and feminine. I wish there weren't. And maybe it sounds like you wish there is, or wish there still were.
I'm saying I think that there are natural people are naturally drawn one way or the other, right?
Sure,
Most people.
Sure.
Of course, there are plenty of people who are gender non-binary or gender fluid who don't subscribe to either sort of group. But then there are people like me who just like, I'm a guy. I've always been a guy. I'm a gay guy, and I'm very gay. But like, there's no part of me that wants to be a woman or identifies with women or wants to dress in feminine ways. When I go to Brooklyn these days, if you look at the queer community, all the guys have nail polish. They're all wearing dresses. They're all, they sort of shun what they would describe as toxic masculinity. Whereas for me, it's not toxic. It's just the way I am and the way I want to be. So the left is fighting themselves. The queer left is fighting themselves about this issue, and the sort of cisgender men, and particularly cisgender white men, are very much seen as the enemy, regardless of how much we fight for the rights of everybody under the queer umbrella. Just our being the way we are is seen as somehow unacceptable. And I know I sound like a Trumper now. I sound like one of those like asshole MAGA guys.
You know what? I honestly think you sound like a 52-year-old, because I'm guessing. But I'm guessing what you're saying. You said Brooklyn, and that means younger to me. And if you're telling me that gay men your age are being more feminine, nail polish and dresses, that would be more surprising to me. But if that's what you're telling me, I feel like
right. It is generational.
Yeah,
it's very generational. I don't know if you're familiar with the Tales of the City series.
No.
It started out as a series of books in the 70s by Armistead Maupin, and it's been dramatized several times over the years. And they came out with a brand new series a few years ago on Netflix. Michelle Buteau was in it. It had a wonderful cast. And there's this great scene where there's a dinner party with all these old gays in their 50s, and they're all white, and one black gay guy in his 20s, and they get into an argument. And it is the most brilliantly written, brilliantly acted scene, because I have been at those dinner parties, and the way that it's done, you end up listening to one side and you're like, that's right. And then you listen to the other side and you're like, that's right. Like they're both completely correct, but coming at the world from very different perspectives.
I want to watch that scene. That sounds really fascinating, depicting.
I'll send you the link. It's so good, but I'm one of the old queens now for sure. And I'm like, whatever happened to just gay guys? Like, why do we have to why do we have to all be, together now with all of these other queer subcultures that we may or may not identify with?
It almost sounds like something that you're I know you're not making it up, but I mean, it's like, why can't you? Are there really not just spaces where like there's gay men, like especially your age, like still predominantly? Or what do you
remember that bar I told you about where people grab my dick? More often than not, when I go there these days, there are women there. Cisgender women, trans women, female presenting women. And I don't want them there. That is a male space. That is a place where gay guys go to like jerk each other off and blow each other and, you know, and be around other men who are like them. They obviously can't keep women out. And I'm not suggesting they should, but women should have the sense of like, this is not a place for me. Just like I wouldn't go hang out at a lesbian bar. It's not for me.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I don't feel that bad for you.
You shouldn't.
Like if that's your worst problem,
that coming from a place of privilege here.
No, but I don't think that you're saying that this is a life or death issue. You're talking about a cultural and generational issue. And, you know, a lot of women like to go to gay bars. My wife took my daughters to one because her cousin's gay out in California. They had a great time. I have
no trouble with women at a gay bar, you know, drinking, socializing, watching a drag show, dancing. That absolutely women are welcome. This is a place for gay male sex.
like the steam room.
Why are you here? Other than to like watch animals in a zoo. That's what it feels like.
I want to talk to you more in the future about a lot of different things. But the last thing I kind of want to ask you is like, what's the conversation with, you know, you don't have to even give me your opinion. Is it fraught? I don't know. Like LGBT, the trans issue is so much different than the gay issue, I feel clearly for a lot of different reasons. But when you talked about growing up and how you identified and the clothes that you wore and that, but you knew that you were gay, or you knew that you didn't know anything.
I wanted dick.
Right. You knew that you wanted it, but you didn't feel like you were in the wrong body or that you wanted to be a woman.
So gender and sexuality are two completely different things. And the best way I've ever heard it explained is your sexuality is who you want to go to bed with. Your gender is who you want to go to bed as.
And that's why I feel like sometimes it's not great to conflate them.
And I used to feel that way too, actually, when I was younger. I have come to a place politically where I feel like, you know, just like I feel like women's rights are human rights, trans rights are human rights, you know.
No doubt.
If the people who are out there legislating against trans people and particularly trans children right now are only doing so because they failed in their efforts to repress us. Right. They tried to convince everyone that gay marriage, same-sex marriage was going to destroy America. Right. And when that turned out to be clearly not the case and it was a losing issue for them, they then found an issue that they could raise money over and win elections on. But it's all the same hatred and repression and fascism. And so, and also you're talking about a very small group of people. Like there are not nearly as many trans people in the world as there are gay, lesbian, bisexual people. So like we have to stand up for them. A, because they're human beings and they deserve to be protected. B, because it's the same shit that's been done to us for decades. It's just taking on a different form now because they're finding out that they can be successful beating up trans people.
That's so well said. And I haven't quite heard it put that way. But then, you know, many states have now outlawed gender affirming care, which gets conflated with surgery, which are not the same at all. I mean, you can begin with just accommodating a child, a teenager or a child, however they want to be addressed and treated. I mean, you can begin there. Then you can start to talk about hormones. These are all serious conversations. But the idea that they are not allowed to have these conversations with adults, with physicians, is just so horribly damaging. What are your thoughts on the damage that these laws are doing? Before we get to the controversies around surgery, which again is not a lot of people, but banning gender affirming stuff. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, most people have a great misunderstanding about gender surgery, right? First of all, there are many, many trans people, trans adults living their lives as the gender they identify with without getting surgery. Surgery is not what makes you your gender, right? Your gender is how you feel on the inside. It's how you identify. So there are plenty of trans women with penises. Most trans men have vaginas because you can't build a good penis. They don't have the technology yet. And like, as my trans friend Josh says all the time, he's like, I have a perfectly good pussy. Why would I want to mess with it? Like, but he's a guy. If you saw him, you would be like, that's a guy. So the whole surgery thing, it's used because it freaks people out, because they don't understand it, because they think it's what defines someone's gender when it's not. P.S. There are also people born with both sets of genitals. They used to be called hermaphrodites. Now they're called intersex. They generally identify as either male or female. They don't look down at themselves and say, well, I guess I'm both. They know what they are. We all know what we are inside, right? We all know whether we're a man or a woman or gay or straight or non-binary or whatever. And that's what we're talking about here. So when a child, as you said, when someone who's assigned female at birth, when they're 4 or 5, 6 years old, says, I don't feel like a girl. I feel like a boy. I want short hair. I want to dress in boys' clothes. I want to, I want to have friends that are boys. And they have parents that accept them and say, yes, you are whatever you want to be. And then take them to a doctor, and then to make a law against that doctor treating them appropriately under the guidelines that have been issued by the American Medical Association and the American Pediatric Association, to say, no, those associations are wrong. We, the redneck, we know better than doctors, and we're going to outlaw care for these children. No one is talking about genital surgery for a child. It isn't done. There is no genital surgery for children. You're talking about maybe giving them puberty blockers.
The bottom line is, even in those cases, that stuff is a long conversation between the family, the child, and their physician. Almost always.
It's a years long discussion.
And you talk to a pediatrician. One of my best friends is a pediatrician, and it's just like those conversations are long, they are thoughtful, and they're arrived at in such a way that usually it's done with a lot of care and patience and time and expertise. And
nobody transitions quickly.
Right.
Nobody.
Right.
And certainly no child transitions quickly.
Right.
So this myth that children are walking into a doctor's office and walking out with new genitals the next day, that is not happening. And if it were happening, what does it have to do with your life? How does it affect you? Not one person's life is going to be better because of these laws that are being passed.
If you transition and you beat me in my sport, it affects me. What do you think of that?
I just talked about this on another podcast.
How dare you?
The answer is I don't care, and neither should you. We're talking about a teeny tiny percentage of athletes that the likelihood that you're going to compete against a trans person in your sport is like getting struck by lightning. It is not an issue that we should be worried about. Now, do I think that like it's fair for a college athlete who was assigned male at birth to compete against other women athletes? Maybe not. Probably not. I'm not saying that there's an easy answer to that. I don't have one. But I do know that it's the last issue we should be addressing right now, after things like climate change and income inequality and school shootings and things that are really killing people every single day. Not whether one swimmer won a medal.
You would think that we would generally be able to agree that the biggest concern we should have about children is the thing that they're most likely to die of, which is now in America, gun violence. Like before that, it was car accidents, I think, and then, the leading diseases. But it's gun violence. But what I'm hearing from you is that you hate swimmers. That's what I'm hearing.
I do hate swimmers. No, I love swimmers, especially male ones. I'm a swimmer.
I think the male swimmer body's weird.
I love it.
I think it's a longer torso and a wider torso, and it's weird looking.
Give me some Michael Phelps any day.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, listen, here's what I say to people. If you're spending a lot of your time thinking about trans athletes, then you have been successfully tricked by politicians who want you thinking about this.
I disagree with that. You've been successfully tricked by media, right-wing media, who convinces politicians that that's a winning issue.
They're hand in hand. I mean, I don't draw a line between right-wing politicians and right-wing media. They literally work together.
Yeah, but I think one leads the other, which is not the case on the left. Like, nobody on the left is answering to Michael Moore or Rachel Maddow or anybody who's the most influential. Right. It's just they don't have that.
That's why we don't give a shit that Don Lemon was fired yesterday, whereas the right is melting down over Tucker Carlson's being fired. We like Don Lemon or we don't like Don. We don't really give a shit. It doesn't affect our lives that Don Lemon lost his job. They're staging revolutions over the fact that Tucker got fired.
Now, I don't like Don Lemon because A, I know and worked with Don Lemon, and B, I've seen Don Lemon on TV. So it's also
he seems like kind of a dickhead.
He's such a pretentious jerk, and he's not smart. You know, he argued with this guy, you know, about race the other day, and Don was on the right side of the argument and didn't win because he's bad at arguing. It's like not great, and he makes it about himself. Anyway, enough about my personal feelings on Don Lemon, but you're absolutely right about people being, you know, apoplectic about Tucker Carlson, which, coming full circle or semicircle, his issue with masculinity and testosterone levels and all that has been watered down to, you know, and a lot of others, like Joe Rogan talks about testosterone, like all this talk of hormones and where it's lacking and masculinity, like a lot of that was Tucker Carlson for sure.
Yeah. I mean, these are all guys who are worried that their dicks aren't big enough. And I sympathize, but it doesn't give you permission to be a dick.
Where are you on testicle tanning, though?
You know, I've never been a fan of nude beaches. I like tan lines on myself and others. So I am anti-testicle tanning, I think you'd have to say. It's hard to get the suntan lotion all over there as well. There's so many folds and wrinkles and so forth.
I just don't think you've tried hard enough, which is strange.
Don't you find?
You never ran out of moisturizer? And okay, it's getting filthy in here. See, Adam, I cannot thank you enough for this conversation. I just had a feeling that we would have a good talk, and I really feel like you enlightened me on a lot of different things. But more importantly, I just appreciate your honesty, vulnerability, and humor. It's really great to do this, and I hope that we could do it again.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and I will be back anytime you want me.
All right. Well, we definitely want him back, don't we? Wasn't that great? Adam Sank, everybody. I thought that was a very poignant, serious, thoughtful, at times pretty funny conversation. And I really appreciated the kind of the context, the maturity of it all. And I hope that gave you a good perspective on things. And I hope that you'll go let Adam know that you appreciate it. AdamSank.com, and all of his social media stuff is in the show notes. Go listen to his comedy, his podcast. And that is all I've got for you on my podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you listen to the whole thing, it's been 90 minutes, and I am very, very grateful to you. If you're not a subscriber and you listen to the whole thing, well, what are you waiting for? Go sign up right now. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. And today's quote, show-ending quote, comes from my friend Mindy Cunningham, who's a longtime listener and supporter, who sent me this from her. Her amazing yoga teacher quoted Nawal al-Saadawi, woman at point zero, who said, "I hope for nothing, I want for nothing, I fear nothing, I am free." Ooh, I like that, Mindy. I hope for nothing, I want for nothing, I fear nothing, I am free. Yeah, that works for me. That was helpful. Thank you very much to you and to everybody else. Jon Carroll, take us away. And I hope to see you tomorrow night at our hangout.
Off of your fence, even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense, and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down, boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come. before the change could begin, they had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.